Hello everyone, welcome back to Sports City. As you can see, a very, very special guest with us today. That's right, Machel St. Hewitt in the flesh. What's up, Virgin? You good?
Simon, we have to boom off the fish, you know?
That's right. It's been a while, man.
Boy,
first time in the flesh.
I had to, once I heard you were coming to England to come to follow the Jamaica Rugby League journey, you know, I had to make sure I was here. I've even travelled up from London all the way this morning to come up to Hull. Had to meet Simon, you know, and had to come follow the team and give him the support from the diaspora, you know.
Yeah, man, I really, really appreciate it, man, and thank you for the journey and you know, giving that support to the team. Wherever and whichever sport Jamaica's in, you've always been loyal and supportive of that. I wanted to talk a little bit about some cricket. Of course, we had some disappointment quite recently. It's like the Reggae Warriors are in a World Cup longer than West Indies in the T20 side of things. Did this issue start when Puran took the captaincy? Did this happen a decade ago? Our worst ever performance in a T20 World Cup. This was unthinkable going into it. We thought, okay, easy peasy, Ireland, Scotland, Zimbabwe. We're going to get to the Super 12s. Maybe win a game or two.
I think, listen, there's so many layers to unpick with this, Simon, and I don't even know where I start to break it down, but I'll try my best. I think at the top end of expectation would have been get to the Super 12s and win 1 or 2 games. Remember last year's World Cup we only won 1, which was against Bangladesh. Granted, we didn't have to qualify. At the bottom end of expectations, which is what I had warned people about before the tournament started, was that we would struggle to qualify. And the reason why I always felt we would struggle to qualify is because several reasons really. This squad that went to the 2022 T20 World Cup is in experience, not in age, in international experience. And I was just worried that lots of them have never been to a World Cup before. Certainly not a T20 World Cup. If they have, it's an ODI World Cup for the large majority, or for the ones I have, I should say. And I was just worried that they wouldn't be able to compete in a pressurized situation where every game matters. It's not bilateral series. You can't afford to lose a game and then hope you're going to recover. And I just didn't know if the players had that kind of mindset to get through a pressurised situation. Also, and I have to say it, I also didn't think the players were necessarily good enough, right? These Australian grounds are big grounds, and our players' mindset is still stuck in, if in doubt, hit out. And I always felt that they wouldn't understand about the dimensions of these grounds, the fact that hitting sixes isn't necessarily going to work. It didn't work in 2021 in the UAE. It was unlikely to work in even big grounds in Australia in 2022. And then let's go even further back. Keen students of the game, yourself included, when we won in 2016, that team was broken up almost immediately after winning that World Cup. The Gales, the Bravos, the Sammies. Pollard was injured for that World Cup, and Ryan had missed it, but Badri left, Sullivan, Ben, Johnson, Charles, Lowe, Rampall. That whole team was broken up after they won in 2016. And it's worth reminding people that when we won in 2016, that was in spite of the then WICB, not because of the WICB. In fact, we were fighting our own board as we went into that World Cup. Sammy's famous interview about we didn't have no kit, Raw Lewis had to go out and buy us certain things, etc., etc. That team gets broken up, Sammy loses the captaincy, Carlos Brathwaite gets the captaincy, and if people really study it, that's when the decline started. This T20 decline hasn't happened just now. It started the minute we decided, let's not, because if you think, with an experienced player, Simon, you have to bleed them in slowly. We didn't do that. We asset stripped our own side, gave the captaincy away, and just assumed that our legacy almost would just take us forward. So I always remember that when Dave Cameron got ousted as Cricket West Indies president, I think we were ranked 9th or 10th in T20 cricket. So our decline was already set in 2019, then COVID came. And the reason why I mentioned COVID coming as being significant is COVID meant we couldn't play cricket a lot. Yes, there was the odd CPL behind closed doors, IPL got cancelled, then they did this, that and the other. So what I'm trying to get at is, in those COVID years, we weren't able to rebuild a side. So in 2021, when we went to the World Cup, because we couldn't rebuild a side, we gambled on, well, let's get the band back together. Let's get all the squad back together that did it in 2016. It was 1 year too late for them, because that World Cup was supposed to be 2020. Right. It was 1 year too late for them. Gail I get why he went, but he probably shouldn't have gone, but I get what happened. They looked around and went, boy, we ain't got anyone. Let's get the old squad back together. Maybe they can give us one last hurrah. They couldn't. Now a year later, all of a sudden now we have a brand new squad. So when you put all of that together, Simon, I almost feel like this was a bit of an inevitability. And I guess the question I put back to you now is, what introspection's going to take place now? Because you and I both know what will happen now. Everyone will say, sack captain, sack coach, sack this person, sack that person, and nothing will change after that, because we've been doing sack everyone for the last 20 years. So I don't know what changes next, Simon.
Well, Ricky Skerritt has been in the position now for about 3 years, roughly. Elections are next year?
Next year, March, yeah.
And there has to be some accountability from the administrators as well. So that would certainly eyes in that direction as well. Bearing in mind that we know post the World Cup in UAE, we had a series in Pakistan, and that felt like a fresh new team. But as you said, not enough opportunities in that sense. But before we touch on the admin, just your initial thoughts about the situation with Dave Cameron and his tweet yesterday. Interesting thoughts, people, as well. This is what an incompetent board looks like. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but along those words.
I think he basically implied in his tweet, it was a picture of Ricky Skerritt when Phil Simmons was, when they, it was the picture of Ricky Skerritt and Kishore Shallow when they had renegotiated with Phil Simmons over, because Phil Simmons, I think, had brought out a grievance package against Cricket West Indies, and they'd obviously settled all of that. And Cameron had tweeted, this is what failure looks like, or something like that, right? My thing is this, and I hope David Cameron is watching this. This might destroy a whole channel, Simon. I hope David Cameron is watching this. When David Cameron left Cricket West Indies in 2019, that organisation was millions in debt. So before David Cameron talks about who's a failure, please explain that to me. Or now I'm still waiting for Dave Cameron to explain why the organisation was millions in debt. Two, when David Cameron left Cricket West Indies, the West Indies cricket team was at the bottom of the rankings in every format of the game. Please, Dave Cameron, explain to me why that was the case at the end of your era. So don't get me wrong, if he thinks that Phil Simmons and Ricky Skerritt and Kishore Shallow are failures, so be it. He's allowed his opinion.
Of course.
But people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. It is what I would say. The last person any of us in West Indies cricket want to hear from, who's involved or has any stake in West Indies cricket, the last person we want to hear from is him.
The next thing is, where do we go from here? We still have to qualify for a 50-over World Cup next year. You do have some teams that are struggling behind us in the standings. South Africa could very well have to go through the qualifiers itself, along Afghanistan have some games to play. But the immediate next thing that we have to turn our minds towards, because the next T20 World Cup, we're hosting it alongside the United States, so that's not on our agenda right now, so to speak. So where should our emphasis be towards? The coaching, the administration, or the current playing crop that we have? You know, where should that emphasis be, that next step in particular? Because it feels like we're having a conversation of this magnitude every 2 years, every year.
So, for those who didn't listen prior to the T20 World Cup, listen now about the ODI World Cup. Do not be surprised if we don't qualify for the ODI World Cup in 2023 either. Do not be surprised. God forbid South Africa end up in those qualifiers. If South Africa end up there with us, they're definitely taking a spot, which means there's only one spot left. Do you really trust us to get in there ahead of Zimbabwe, potentially Ireland, Netherlands, etc.? I wouldn't be putting any money on us to get that second spot. And the reason why is ODI cricket is our worst format of cricket. So if this T20 failure to qualify has hurt people, boy, best prepare for 2023, because that's even harder as a qualifying prospect for the West Indies. And I guess that links to what I say about where do we go next. Arguably, I would say that we just have to grin and bear it, Simon, because to improve the current situation, it doesn't start with the team the players who are currently in our team. It actually starts with the next generation. If we're really serious, that's where it starts, and it's about embedding processes, strategies, things at the grassroots, things that Cricket West Indies are trying to do right now. The coach education program, where Chris Brabazon, the coach education manager, is going around the different territories trying to upskill the coaches. Because the problem, Simon, is in our white ball cricket, after what, still decades, we're talking about dot balls, rotation. We've been talking about this for years, Simon. It's not just this team, all the previous teams before them, dot balls, strike rotation, etc., right? And succumbing to big shots at the wrong time. Until you can fix that mindset at grassroots so that when they come up to international level, because we're basically asking Phil Simmons and whoever eventually becomes the next coach to fix flaws that already exist in their games that they've picked up from grassroots levels up. So until we change it from grassroots up, I don't see anything fundamentally changing. And what that probably points out, Simon, is when we won in 2012, 2016, now people might appreciate that we just had generational talents then.
Right.
And what's happened now is those generational talents have gone, and now we're dealing with, quote unquote, what's the best word? Now we're dealing with ordinary players who are occasionally good, but more often average. And the problem is with West Indies cricket, because we still carry that name West Indies, people expect more than potentially the players are able to produce on a regular basis. So where we go now from here, Simon, is probably more pain and more struggle.
Lastly on this topic, Machel, you know, we have a Super 50 coming up tournament. Is that something that we can look forward to and say, okay, let's see what gem comes out of this, and then we take it from there? Let's try to see some patterns of progression. Can a team get to 270, 280? Because sometimes it feels like in recent times you get 220 and you can win a game.
Basically, yeah. So I think if you think back to last year's Super 50, do you remember the game when Jamaica had to defend one? It was a knockout game to get to the semis, and the Scorpions had to defend. I think it was like 170 against Barbados, and Blabber, Andre McCarthy. Andre McCarthy took 4 for whatever it was, 4 for like 10 or something ridiculous, right? And that almost sums up your point. Super 50 in the past looks like you can basically defend anything because of the weak batsmanship in the region. In an ideal world for this Super 50, other than Jamaican Scorpions winning, but in an ideal world, we see some players hit some big scores but at a good strike rate, so that we can think about maybe we can involve them in the, that doesn't mean they walk straight into the side, but maybe we can involve them in the next level. That's what we need to see. I think the bowling doesn't take care of itself, but we know we've got bowlers. We know we've got an Alzari Joseph. We know we've got a Jaden Seals. We know we've got a Jason Holder or whatever, or a Keel Hassan. We know we've got those bowlers already. We're looking for batters who can rotate strike and reduce dot ball percentage. So at the bare minimum, that's what we'd like to see in Super 50.
Well said, well said. Guys, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast on YouTube. The link will be in the description below. And also follow them on Twitter as well, the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Machel St, Patrick Hewitt, and also Santoki Nagalendran. Some brilliant, brilliant work. Anything coming up so that the viewers can look out for in terms of cricket content?
No, as Simon says, people just follow the channels. You'll always see us talking about West Indies cricket, but more importantly of all, make sure after you've watched this video, subscribe to Sports City, click the link, click the bell, press like, share, etc., etc.
And do the same as well for Caribbean Cricket Podcast, the #1 source for Caribbean cricket across the globe. Take care. Bye-bye for now.